Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Chafei. We're going to pick up 4 lines from the top, the part that we read, we did very quickly at the end of yesterday. So we have a debate of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan on what is this halacha that if a Nazir dies or the husband annuls the vow, and there's money that has been sanctified and set aside for the korbanot, and it's not specified which, that it all gets used for an olah. And the Gemara assumes that the case here is that it's assumed that the money, this pile, was going to go to all of the korbanot, including the chatas. So it's a particular chiddush. It's not like it could have all gone to an olah. Some of it had to go to a chatas. And nevertheless, the halacha is that it gets to all go to an olah once it cannot be used for the Nazir purposes. So Rabbi Yochanan said it's a halacha l'moshe misinai. Reish Lakish learned it from a pasuk. So the Gemara says the following. B'yishleim with Rabbi Yochanan, Damar halacha he ben Nazir. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, that's all halacha. Am tu lahachis tu mimi mefarashim lo. So therefore, okay, it's a halacha. It has arbitrary rules. We can't ask any questions. The halacha is that if the pile has been non-designated, then that's when you get to use it for an olah. If the things have been designated, this is a pile for chatas, this is for an olah, this is for a shlamim, then the halacha wasn't said, and you do with each pile what you're supposed to do. El Reish Lakish, according to Reish Lakish, who learns it from a pasuk, for all of their nidarim and for all of their nidavas, and for that he learned that something that basically started as a neder, like nizirut, which begins as a neder, and then somehow there's leftover funds, you use it towards a nidava, which is understood to represent a full gift, an olah, which is fully given over. So that's like the paradigmatic nidava. So if that's true, that's the pasuk, so you're stumin. Why would it only be by a pile of money that's been non-designated? Afilu mefarashim, even if it's been designated, it's money that started off for a neder, is left over essentially, can't be used for its intended purpose because the Nazir died or it was the husband annulled the Nazirut. And now let's just use it for a nidava, maybe even if the money was explicitly designated as such. So the Gemara says, Amarava, no. Mefarashim lo matzis no. If the money's been specifically designated, you can't repurpose it. We know already there's a principle that leftover funds for a particular purpose stay within the category that they've been designated. How do you know this? For Paska Tana de Rabbi Yishmael, let's learn from the bright of Rabbi Yishmael. That's the pasuk. The sacrifices that you have and your vows, you should lift up and bring to the place where God has chosen. And the end of the pasuk is okay, so and you should bring your olot, your burnt sacrifices, and so on. And for the shlamim, you eat their meat. So that's like a general pasuk that says you bring your korbanos to the Beis Hamikdash. The point of this midrash halacha though is that there's enough other psukim that say you bring your korbanot to the Beis Hamikdash. So this has to be telling you something else. So what else is this telling you? So rak kadashecha asher yulucha unidarecha. So that's not your normal korbanot. That's something else that's sanctified. A child of a sacrifice. So you have some female animals and you sanctified them and then they gave birth. So that's sort of a derivative type of a kedusha, or a tmura. You said this animal is in exchange for this, and as we know, you're not allowed to do that. And if you do it, the second animal becomes sanctified, and the first one retains its sanctity. So all of those are things that are not just your classic sacrifices, but a certain amount of a derivative kedusha. And even those, it says, what do you do with a tmura? And what do you do with a vlad? So you might have felt like, I don't know, maybe you're stuck. Like you can't use, it wasn't the original kedusha. Maybe you have to let it graze and redeem it. How do you know what you're supposed to do with a vlad and a tmura? So this pasuk tells you, no, you can bring those as sacrifices as well. So what do you do with them? So mata kanatan, what are you going to do with these? So that are not the original kedusha. Tisau vato makom sheyivchar Hashem. Bring them to the place that God has chosen. So okay, so maybe you bring him up to the Beis Hamikdash and then you don't do anything with him. Maybe you bring him up to the Beis Hamikdash and you let him die there, which would be pretty ironic. Okay, no. At the end of the pasuk says, so you should actually bring the sacrifices. Okay, so that tells you that you have these derivative kedushas. What do? You bring them as their original kedusha would have been brought. So to tell you, the same thing you would do the olah, do with its exchange. The same way you would treat the shlamim, deal with the child of the shlamim. Now, why does it give the example of tmura for an olah and a vlad for a shlamim? quiz. Why?
And Ola has to be a male.
Male, right. So, right. Ola has to be a male. Imalal Kabanomi Nazachar. And a Shlamim can be a male or a female. So, you could have had a Tmura Shlamim, but you could not have a Vlad Ola. So, since we're giving the example of a Vlad by a Shlamim, we're going to give the example of a Tmura by an Ola. All right. So anyway, so either one, Vasito Lotecha Basar Adam, the Dam Zivachecha is a Shlamim, right? Dam Zivachecha was Dam Zivachecha. And you eat the meat of the shlamim. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's what we learned, that what you do with those is that you bring them in the way that they've been, is that the original kedusha has been designated. Now, yochol afavlad chatas v'tmurs asham came. How about the child of a chatas? Chatas is again female, or the tmura of an asham is male, so you can't have a vlad there. Maybe even those derivative kedushas, you also bring them as korbanot. Rak Kadashacha, not all of them. It's actually true that the psukim are talking basically about an Ola and a Shlamim. They're not talking about a Chatas and an Asham. Diva Rabbi Shmuel, that's what Rabbi Shmuel says, because as we know, we'll talk about Asham in a minute, but as we know, certainly by a Chatas, if it's not the original Kedusha, if it can't be used for its intended purpose, the owner died, they were toned with another, or it was the child of a Chatas, or it's not the original thing that was sanctified. In all those cases, the animal has to be let die. You cannot bring it as a Korban. A Chatas is very much the concrete function. It's specific, and it cannot have any function outside of that. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Yishmael learns. Rabbi Akiva Omer Einot Tzarich. You don't need to learn it from the pasuk about Tisau Vata and from all of these, have a whole parsha in the Torah talking about that, or maybe from the word rak, to exclude a chatas and an asham. Harei Omer, the verse of the pasuk says, Asham hu. It is an asham. We're a different pasuk, not by here. We're talking about an asham. It doesn't leave its status of being an asham. It cannot serve any other function. Okay, now it's not exactly clear why Rabbi Akiva prefers a pasuk of Shamhu to a pasuk of Rak. Either way, you're learning it, I don't know, from an extra word. It doesn't seem easy to fit this into a classic, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva debate, where Rabbi Yishmael was learning the pasuk in a more natural way than Rabbi Akiva. Anyway, maybe Rabbi Akiva was saying is that Rak is a little generic. It's not clear what it's excluding. A Shamhu is specifically by an Ashram and telling you the Ashram retains its identity, cannot somehow be used in any other type of a function. Anyway, what you see from this is, to get back to our point before we further unpack this, is this pasuk tells you that some type of derivative kedusha, vlad, tmura, etc., is used the same way as the original kedusha. So if it came from an ola, it's used as an ola. If it came from a shlamim, it's used from a shlamim. And therefore, our assumption is that the same would be true in any type of a case if something has a clear category and a designation. So just because Reish Lakish learns from this pasuk that somehow money gets repurposed as an ola, we're saying that can never have been possible if the money already was clearly designated. Like we know that something that has a kedusha that's been designated, it stays in that category. Okay, so if the money has been set aside as an ola, then the guy died, it's going to be used as an ola, no different than if the animal was a tmura or whatever. If the money was set aside as a shlamim and the guy died, or the Nazirus was annulled, it's going to be used as a shlamim. If it's going to be a chatos and he died, it's like this chatos that gave birth to a baby. And what do you do with it? You don't bring it. You let it die. You do the same thing. If it can't be used at that original purpose, you let it die. Those are categories we know. So if the pasuk is still telling you something that started as a neder, meaning Nazirus or whatever, becomes a nidava, becomes an ola, the only case it could be talking about is a pile of unspecified monies. That type of a thing, because it's not specified and we don't know exactly what to do with it, that the pasuk can tell us, that the chiddush of the pasuk is you use that as an ola. And again, part of the big chiddush there is, even though Tosfos is saying, sounds a little from the Gemara, Tosfos makes it clear that even though it was clear that from that pile was going to come all three korbanot, so some money from that pile was going to be used for a chatos and a shlamim. Nevertheless, because it's not specified, the pasuk is telling you it all gets to be used as an ola. Yes.
Well, why couldn't you ask the same kasha to Rabbi Yochanan and say that no, if it's meforashim because of this limud?
You could, but the point is you don't need to go to the limud. It's all halach l'moshe misinai, so we can't even ask any questions. He will just tell us.
There's no distinction. What's the halach l'moshe misinai? There's no distinctions.
No distinctions. No, it's the opposite point. The point is that you can't ask any logical questions about it. It's all an arbitrary rule. So if he's telling us the arbitrary rule says in cases of A, B, C, and D, when it has these criteria, this is what you do with it. We can't say, well, why not in this other case? What do you mean why not in this other case? That's a special rule. It's a special exception. It's said for this concrete narrow circumstances. End of story. But with Reish Lakish, you could ask a type of a logical question. Why should it apply to one type of scenario and not another? Okay. So we need to show, no, there's reasons why it doesn't apply to other scenarios. All right, so now the Gemara says, now we're going to unpack this. Okay, Tani, so we taught, like, let's go back and now look at this Breita now that we sort of finished with our Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan and we understand this idea of Mos Tumim. Okay, Tani, Yochu Yalim Lebeis Bechira of Yimnem Mayim Mazon. If you have this Tmura or a Vlad of a Korban, maybe you bring him up to the Beis Mikdash and just let him die before you got to the end of the pasuk where it says Vasito Lotecha, where it just said, Tisau Vata. So the Gemara says Bishvil Shir Musu. So the Gemara, I'm being my between Shir Tamadoma Vasito Lotecha. Amai Havlat Chatasu De'amina Bamisa. 1 minute. This idea that you let an animal die, that's a special halacha l'Moshe Misinai, a special tradition that we have by the child of a chatas. Okay, by that, chatas that can't be brought, we have to let die. And by the way, the issue came up yesterday. What do you do with them? And I said, yeah, you starve them to death. And here, basically, that's what this is saying. You withhold food and water, like all of us today. Okay. Anyway, hopefully we won't have the same end, right? Anyway, you withhold from them food and water. That's what you do by a chatas. You starve it and you let it die. Okay, but the Gemara says, so you don't need a pasuk to tell me, don't do that by a Oleg Shlomim that isn't the original one. Because I don't need a pasuk because I know that the halacha tells me do it by a chatas. So somehow I would know that tradition that says this is what you do by a chatas that can't be brought in the the way it was intended. I can infer that I don't do it by anything else. Okay, again, somehow once we're in this area of halacha l'Moshe Misinai, we should have learned that every halacha l'Moshe Misinai is essentially like an exception. Okay, it's telling me this narrow concrete case, this is what this halacha l'Moshe Misinai is set for. So since by a chatas there's like this halacha l'Moshe Misinai that you let it die, so clearly I know that it doesn't apply by other things. It's clearly a din by a chatas. So why do I need the pasuk to tell me not to do it by these other things? So the Gemara says no. Ilav kraf, it wasn't for the end of the pasuk. V'asito lotecha basar ve'adam. Have'amin, I would have thought vlad chatas b'chol makom. Yeah, maybe by this child of a chatas that I can't bring for its intended purpose, I let it die, I starve it to death wherever it'll be. But Vladi Kodshim, but these other korbanos, the Olam, the Shlamim, the Beis HaBechira, that's Tisal Vata. I have to bring it up to the Beis HaMikdash and let it die there. What a crazy halacha. Anyway, all right, so I still might have thought, yes, it's a special rule by chatas, but that you let it die, but that's it, you let it die everywhere. Maybe this pasuk is telling me by these other things, bring him up and let him die in the Beis HaMikdash. Kamash Malan Delo. Okay, so it tells me, no, bring it up to the Beis HaMikdash and actually bring it as a sacrifice. Fine, that was a little crazy halacha. Moving on. Ketani, let's keep on going. Yochol Avlad Chatos Utmos Asham Kei. It goes on to say maybe this idea that this is what you do with a Ola and a Shlomim that are derivative Kedusha, not the original sort of, use. You can go ahead and bring it as a Korban regardless. Maybe it's that I would do the same with a child of a Chatas. Also bring it as a Korban, right? And then it says Rak, or Rabbi Akiva says Ashamhu, by an Asham, and presumably it's the same by a Chatas. Talmud Omer Rak. So the Gemara is going to have a very similar question. Lama Likra, Hilchos HaGemirila. Why do you need a pasuk? We have a halacha l'Moshe Misinai to tell you that a chatos, that you don't do this with a chatos, like we just referred to a minute ago. That the child of a chatos has to die because it can't be brought. By the way, the 5 cases of a chatos that cannot be used for its original purpose are the mnemonic is vitimna hisapi legesh. So vlad chatas, tmuras chatas, mesu ba'aleha, the owners died, so it can't be brought. Kapu ba'acher, they lost it and they brought another korban in its stead. And what's the last one? Vlad mesu niskapu ba'acher. What?
He's made for the.
No, that would be Naziris. Yeah, but that's not the normal case. Mesu. I'm blanking on it. No, Nevda is Niskapu Ba'acher. Okay, it'll come to me. Avrosh Nasa. Oh, and it's more than a year old. Okay, so anyway, those are the 5 cases. All right, so anyway, okay, so we know that that's halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Of course, the simple sense of this is Maybe not everybody agrees that the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Maybe according to Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, they're learning it from this pasuk, either from the pasuk of Rak or from the pasuk of Asham Hu. They're learning that you don't bring it as a korban. Now, how do you know if you don't bring it as a korban, it means you starve it and you let it die? I mean, what other options are there if you can't bring it as a korban? Maybe you could have said that you wait till it gets a mum and you redeem it. But I mean, okay, but once it's, but you could say, maybe that's sort of built on, that's sort of logically the next step. Once the pasuk is telling me I don't have an option of bringing it, then if I can't bring it, then why should redeeming it be any better than the child of the chatas or the tumor of the chatas? If I can't bring the thing that's not the original thing, when it's not serving its original function, maybe it's just obvious that I have to let it die. Somehow, though, the Gemara is this Gemara and a lot of other Gemaras are very committed to the idea that a chatas dies is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and therefore they say, why are we learning it from a pasuk? But again, you see from the very fact that this midrash halacha had a havamina that you would let the ola and the shlomim die if they're not the original one. You see that the simple sense of this midrash halacha is if the pasuk is telling me, the pasuk is either telling me I'm allowed to bring it when it's not the original one, and if that's not the option, then presumably it's telling me I have to let it die. Right? So the simple sense is that this midrash halacha is learning the idea that a vlad chatas dies implicitly from the fact that the pasuk is telling me it can't be brought. Nevertheless, the Gemara is committed to the idea that that's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and therefore wants to know, why do I need this pasuk if I already know it from a halacha l'Moshe Sinai?
What was the question before we asked the same thing?
That was about what would be the havamina that you would let the old one, the shlomim, die if we obviously know it's only by a chatas. And the answer is. And the answer there was like, why do I need to tell me by Ola and Shamim if I already know it by a chata? I mean, what's the havamina by Ola and Shamim? The answer to the havamina would have been they have to die in the Beis Hamikdash. Here the question is, why do I need to tell me the halacha that a chatas dies that can't be used if I already know that halacha from a halacha?
That means that the Bavli's agenda is to move away from the authority of a medrash halacha.
No,
to somehow transpose it into a different category.
Yeah, I know.
Why
I
would
wouldn't
they want
say
to
that.
do
I
that?
wouldn't say that. I would not generalize it like that.
I mean, in this case.
Yeah, because in general, it's not like it says we'd rather learn something from halacha l'Moshe Sinai from a pasuk. It's just saying that in this case, it's committed to the idea that this halacha we know from a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay, if it were just up in the air, right, it could have said, well, why do I need a halacha l'Moshe Sinai? I have it from a pasuk. So it's not like in principle it seems the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is better. It's just that particularly by this halacha that there are 5 chatos which are mesos, it's committed to the idea that we know this as a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So it doesn't want to say that we're getting it from this pasuk.
And which temurot are you allowed to ta'ev and then you redeem it if it gets a blemish? Not a chata.
You can't do anything as a temura. You can bring every temura that's not a temura's chatas as a korban or an asham, but you're not allowed to make a temura. But if an animal gets a blemish, you're allowed to redeem it on money and then use the money to go ahead and to buy a different korban. That's not a tumor because you're redeeming it on money. You're not exchanging it for another korban directly. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Okay, so lamali kra hilchazak mirila vad chatas lebita azil. So we know this is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Why does it seem like this is what the pasuk is teaching us? So the Gemara says, hachanami, yeah, you're right. We do know it as a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The kra asham hu da'asa. But what we don't know is what the halacha is by an asham. And an asham you also are not allowed to bring if it's like a tmuras asham. It's not the original thing that can't be brought for the original purpose. So the Gemara says, now asham nami hilchas gemiri. 1 minute. That's part of our halacha l'Moshe Sinai. What's our halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Kol she'ilu b'chatas mesa ba'asham roeh. The halacha l'Moshe Sinai is that anything that by a chatas you would let die, by an asham, which is very similar, it's chait related, but somehow we always assume actually there's a position there's one of the Tanaim says that it is exactly like a chatos, but we always say that's a little bit different. It's not as weighty, but it's very similar. So by the asham, the halacha is you can't bring it as a korban. What you do is you wait for you allow it to graze. And what do you do when you allow it to graze? Big deal. So when you allow it to graze is then when it gets a blemish, you redeem the value and you bring with it not an asham, because again, if it wasn't the original asham was sanctified for, it cannot be brought, nothing else can be brought. So what you do though is you redeem it and you bring it as an olah. So that's an interesting halacha. Like this unspecified pile. Somehow there's this halacha that you redeem it, you wait for it to get a blemish, you redeem the value, and you go ahead and you use that money for an olah. Now, by the way, just because what I said was a little bit precise, if the asham has not like if the asham can still be used for its original purpose, let's say I sanctified animals in asham and it got a blemish before I brought it as a korban. then fine. The same is true by an asham or chatas. If it still can be used for its original purpose, you redeem it, you buy another animal, and that becomes the original asham. It becomes the original chatas. But in a case where it cannot be used for its original purpose, it's a tmura, the owners brought another korban, the owners died, whatever the case might be, can't be used for its original purpose. For chatas, getting a blemish doesn't matter. It has this kedusha. This can never be used for something other than its original purpose, so it has to be let die. Whereas by an asham, the chiddush is, even though it can't be used for that original purpose, in this it can be transferred into an ola if the animal gets a blemish. Okay, do you have a question? No.
No, it's just like, so we say an ashram and a hatas are exactly the same, and yet, this
Right,
is
not exactly
very
the same.
concrete.
Right, so that's what I said. There is a Tana that says exactly the same, but this is saying not.
But again, so the animal for a chatat or for an asham, it gets a blemish before I bring it.
Yeah.
Right. So I redeem it. I get another animal, and I bring that instead.
Yep.
So that first one loses its kedusha.
Yep.
I can have lamb chops for dinner.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, you can't. There are certain things you can't do with it, like you can't graze it and work it. But yes,
You
check
can use
and
it
eat
like for business
Right.
purposes.
Right, you can check it and eat it. That's certainly true. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So now the Gemara says. So we also know so you can't tell me the pasuk is telling you Nashim. That's part of the Alach L'Moshe Sinai, that it grazes and then if it can't be used, it grazes and then eventually it becomes an ola. So Ella. So the Gemara says fine. You're right. But it was just for the halacha. I would have thought. Fine. There's a halacha that says you have to let this chatas die. But let's say I went ahead, I brought the chatas. No, so I would have thought that maybe I didn't do the right thing with it, but I wouldn't have thought that I somehow transgressed a pasuk in the Torah, like I would have transgressed a positive or negative command. Lo l'chayv alev lo klum. So kamash malan kra. So the pasuk is telling me the makriv le kaim ale ba'aseh. You actually transgress a positive command. What's the positive command? This is all for not Rabbi Akiva, but for Rabbi Yishmael. It says, "V'asita olotecha habasar adam." It says, "Rak kadashecha asher yulchavata." Only your kadashecha, only your olos and shlomim can you bring as a korban if somehow it's not the original one. But a chatos is not included. So basically, it's an implicit prohibition that derives from a positive, right? It's a lota say haba michlal say. You're only for your oaths and shlamim can you bring them implicitly, not your chatas. So if you were to have brought your chatas in this circumstance, you would have violated the assay. So the Alach L'Moshe Sinai tells me that it can't be brought. It's not kosher if it's brought in this case. And this pasuk tells me that I violated an assay. That's how we solved it for Rabbi Yishmael. But we're not done because Rabbi Akiva doesn't learn it from an assay. Rabbi Akiva learned it from the pasuk Hasham Hu. So he doesn't connect it to this pasuk of telling me, what I can and cannot do. So according to him, we're back to the question why you needed the pasuk. Let's take a look. Rabbi Akiva Omer Eino Tzarich. Harei Omer Hasham Hu b'Avyaisa Yehei. You don't have to learn it from the pasuk of Rak Kadashecha. You learn from the pasuk of Hasham Hu that it does not change its identity. Okay, by the Asham and implicitly by the Chatos. So or not whatever. Not only doesn't change its identity, cannot be used, cannot be brought if it's not the original thing. So the Gemara says, "Lamli kra Gemara Gemirila Kosher b'chatos meisha ba'asham roa." We're back to our question. Why do I need a pasuk? I have a Alach L'Moshe Sinai that if it's the vlad or tamur, whatever it is, if it can't be brought for its original purpose, it has to graze. And again, you can't tell me here that I needed to tell me you transgress a positive command if you bring it, because Rabbi Akiva isn't learning it from a pasuk with a positive command. He's not learning it from pasuk Rak Kadashecha Sheyulucha. He's learning it from pasuk of Hasham Hu. So the Gemara says, Hachinami, you're right. The pasuk is coming to tell me what Rav tells me. Dama Rav Hunam Rav. Asham Shanitak L'Re'iyah, if a Asham has been given over to graze, like it was handed over to the shepherd, and that was set out to pasture, V'shchatos L'Shem Ola Kasher. If you shechted it even before it got a blemish, and you shechted it for an Ola, it actually counts as an Ola. Once it was put into that mode, once it was put into the stage of, we're now putting it into the process where it's going to get a blemish, and we're going to redeem it and use it for an Ola, that is enough to change its identity now. Now it's seen as a future olah, and if you actually were to shecht it with the animal itself, not the funds that had been not you bought some substitute
before it got a blemish.
It didn't get a blemish. You didn't transfer it. It's the animal itself. Somehow the kedusha itself, because now it's in the process of the kedusha becoming ultimately the kedushas olah. When it gets to that other animal, even in this animal itself, it can turn it into an olah.
So
Okay.
what? Across the board for Nashim.
Across the board.
Like it's all the time. This is not with any specific
No. It's specifically about an asham that cannot be used for its original purpose, like the case of a tumor. Right, a normal asham, no. But this asham, where the halach l'moshe misinai is telling me that what you're going to do is wait for it to write this asham that is it can't be a flood. It's a tumura. It's the mesu ba'aleha niskapru ba'acher. This type of a thing where it cannot be coming for that original sin, right? So therefore, there's nothing to do with it. And the halach l'moshe misinai tells me you get a blemish and then you use it to buy an ola. This is a particular asham. The halach l'moshe misinai says is on the path of becoming an ola. And therefore, even before any of that happened, once it just began the process and was given over to the shepherd, its kedusha is now essentially transformed already. And were you to shecht it, it would be an ola. Okay, so taima denitak. So the Gemara says taima denitak. So the reason now that's what Rav Huna Marav teaches us. Now the reason is because it was already handed over for pasture. Halo nitak lo. But if it wasn't handed over for pasture, just because we know it's still eventually what's going to happen, but it hasn't somehow shifted gears yet. It's still in its old state. It hasn't somehow begun its new process. So in that case, we would not say if you shechted it just right at the outset, even after it became not useful for its original purpose, it would not be an ola. Damakra hu. Asham hu. Of yaiso yehe, it retains that status unless you do something to change its identity. So somehow we're saying the pasuk who is telling me, again, we know this idea. It's very funny, right? The simple sense of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel is they are learning from the psukim, this idea that an asham and a chatos that cannot be used for the original chait are basically let die, or the asham, whatever. You don't bring it, you do something else with it. The Gemara is so committed to the idea that we know all of this, halacha Moshe Sinai, both a chatos and an asham, it has to tell me that they're learning something else with these psukim. So Rabbi Yishmael is learning from these psukim there's an Isra Aseh, and Rabbi Akiva is learning from these psukim that the asham it has that identity, it a little bit resists changing its identity. Yes, the halacha Moshe Sinai tells me that once it starts a process of being put out to pasture, so it can get the mum, so the money can be transferred, so it can be brought as an ola. Once it starts that process, that that then its kedusha has changed, has transformed. If you shecht it, it's an ola. But the who tells me it's a little resistant to starting that process, and it's only once it's handed over to the shepherd. Before that happens, if you were to shecht it, it would still be an unusable asham and not be kosher. Now, I see a lot of hands. I just want to point out that there's a very large tosus here because there's some interesting positions of Rabbeinu Tam about all of this. Like Rabbeinu Tam thinks that actually this idea that you have to wait to put it out to pasture is only a Durabbana, not a Doraisa. So he has to reread this Gemara because this Gemara sounds like it's a Doraisa that you need it to be put out to pasture for it to change its identity. So Rabbeinu Tam basically says, no, he completely rewrites the Gemara. It's not about being put out to pasture. It's about having specific kavanah to make it an ola. Like if you shecht it even without being put out to pasture, but if you shecht it l'shem ola, it works. If you shecht it l'shem asham, it doesn't work. That's really what makes it change its identity, not being put out to pasture and so on. Anyway, it's not the simple sense of this Gemara by any means. This Gemara seems like it's Yoraisa that putting it out to pasture changes its identity. But Rabbeinu Tam, based on another Gemara, wants to say that that's only rabbinic. So he has another way of reading what would be the dividing line between those two stages. Yeah, Charlie, you have a question? Michael?
Yeah, so I don't know if the Gemara's going to do this over here. So they can say Rabbi Akiva has a pasuk already. Was Rabbi Shmuel?
No, the Gemara does not do that, thankfully. Tosus does that. It's actually quite interesting. Tosus sort of says, if you go back and you read the Breita, it doesn't sound at all like that's what they're talking about. Like Rabbi Yishmael was learning an Isra Aseh and Rabbi Akiva was learning this halacha. Because if that's what they were talking about, then they're not talking to one another. They're talking about different points. So Tosus actually says, it's actually an interesting Tosus. He basically says, well, we would have to say, according to this Gemara, that Rabbi Akiva didn't understand what Rabbi Yishmael was saying. That Rabbi Akiva thought what Rabbi Yishmael was saying is what the Breita sounds like Rabbi Yishmael was saying, that he's actually learning the real halacha that a chatas has to be let die. So it's actually, Tosus basically points out that the problems with this read is that it completely violates the sense of what's going on in the Breita. And his basic answer is, well, we'd have to say, according to this Gemara, that basically Rabbi Akiva wasn't understanding Rabbi Yishmael. But what it really means is the Gemara is not pshat in the Breita. The Breita is they really are learning out the basic halacha that a chatas is.
I want to add another question.
Yeah.
These kataot are put into this kippah, right? That's really that?
Yeah.
It's not in the Beit HaMikdash.
No.
It's just a regular Beit.
Yeah, it's wherever you are. You're somewhere in the Galilee or something. Yes,
I would have thought the phrase would have been nitan l'rai, like it was given over to the, what's nitak?
Nitak is because it's about changing its identity.
So it's
separated,
nitak from
it's removed
its
from its original identity. Exactly. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Amamar, halacha hi b'nazir. Okay, so this is back to Rabbi Yochanan's statement that it's a special halacha by Nazir that this pile of unspecified funds gets assigned to be an ola. The two leka, is it only a Nazir that this halacha applies to? Like it sounds like it's a special Nazir halacha. There are other cases that are essentially the exact same. That time we turn the brisa. All other, we don't have to compare to what else, but all other people that are obligated for a kinim, for bird sacrifices, like, which includes like a classic case would be a yoledes would be one classic example, but basically many people that bring korbanot, often it's also on the ola v'yored scale, where you could bring a bigger korban, but if you don't have enough money, you bring a bird korban, and one is an ola and one is a chatos. So you have person was obligated in these two bird sacrifices. Okay, where were we? They set aside money for their birds. This pile of money be used for my two birds. Okay, yavi olas behema yavi. Now, what happened to them was, this is why we're talking about the fact that they're in the ola v'yored, they're on the sliding scale. Is that after they set aside the money, they came in. They came into some more money. They came, they won the lottery, whatever. The business deal, did well, and now they actually have the money. They're no longer entitled to bring the cheaper korban. They have to bring the more expensive one. So you have this pile of unspecified funds. And what you're allowed to do now is say, well, it was for a chatas or an ola, or maybe for both. That's the interesting possibility. But what can I do with it now that I have to bring not birds, but an animal sacrifice? Fine. I'll use it towards my animal chatas, or I'll use it towards my animal ola. Okay? So, ratzalahavi ben chatas behema yavi, olas behema yavi. Now, what we have to assume here as well, this gets also to the Tosfos issue that he raised yesterday, is, are we assuming that this pile means that from this pile is going to come both birds? Then it would be a big chiddush, because then from this pile is money of a chatas and an ola that I'm using just for one of them, right? Just for the animal chatas or the animal ola. So Tosfos is assuming, no, actually what we'll assume is we're talking about, again, a case where Tosfos says sometimes it really just depends on the language you use. If you say, this is for my korbanot, then we assume that it has both chatas and ola monies here, and then you would not be able to use it all for one. If you just say, this is for my obligation, so then obligation could mean towards my obligation, not for both of my korbanot, and then you could use it all for one, and therefore the same way you could use all of it for one bird, you can therefore, now that you're bringing, bigger animals, you can use them all for one of them, and you don't have to split the money between the chatas and the ola. Okay, so that's in that scenario. So we're going to assume the pile can be used all for one, and they're even as birds, and that's why when you're now buying a behema from it, you can use it all for one type of a behema. Yes.
So with birds, isn't there a thing that you can sort of use them interchangeably once you have a pile? Once you have two.
No, you can't use them interchangeably, but you don't have to designate them. You can wait to be designated until the Kohen actually slaughters them.
Right. So there's a long period of time where they're kind of
non-specified. Right, exactly. But again, if this pile were that clearly both birds would come from it, even if it's not specified, if it basically had the kedusha of chatas and a ola in it, even in a non-specified way, you couldn't designate it all for just a chatas or all for an ola. That's what bothers Tosfos. So he has to say, once again, that this is a case where the language you used was open-ended enough that it didn't have to be read as you have both korbanot here. Okay, and therefore you can use it all for one. Now, mace, let's say instead of now him coming into money, he died. Okay, v'hayulo mos sutumim, and this money is non-specified. Yiplu l'nedava. So then again, it goes to an ola. So once again, you see it's exactly the halacha by a Nazir. How did Rabbi Yochanan say it's only by a Nazir? Now, again, I want to say, and again, the same point I made this yesterday, what all this that Tosfos is pointing out is not really explored in the Gemara, but Tosfos says, 1 minute. If before he died, the pile could be used all for an ola or all for a chatos, it was open-ended enough. So there's not a big chiddush to say after he died, we can do the same thing with it, right? So what Tosfos is saying, and what he sort of the Gemara implied earlier, is part of this chiddush that after he dies you can use it all. You use it all for an ola. Is even in a scenario where it's clear the pile was going to be used for both. Again, that's not stated here in the Gemara. It's not stated in the Mishnah, but Tosfos sort of is dealing with that to navigate these 2 points. When it was he's alive, it says you can use it all for a chatas or all for an ola. So why are you allowed to? It must be the case was that the pile was open-ended in terms of its purpose.
Stumim.
After he dies, yes, but not stumim. Stumim in the sense of even more open-ended. Open-ended that it could be all for one. But then after he died, if there's a chiddush that it's used for an ola, it's not much of a chiddush if you could have said the same thing when he was alive, right? And before the Gemara made it clear that it understands this word stumim refers not just that it's not specified, but that actually both types of monies are present. Okay, that you have to use the pile for both types of things. So again, that's Tosfos is reading this in. I know I'm complicating this, but I just wanted to sort of point out that Tosfos is reading that in to point out that that's part of the chiddush. Now again, both monies does not mean that I said, here's my chatas money, here's my ola money, and it got mixed up. In that case, I'm stuck. Okay, it's to me means I said both the chatas and the ola are going to come from this pile, but I haven't designated how much for each and so on. And there the chiddush is that even though there is chatas money that is going to come from this pile, if the guy dies, it can be used toward, it's all used towards an ola.
That's a very nice read of the Kanim.
What?
It's a very nice read of the case of the bird,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Sorry, so when it says Ratza Lavi Ben Chatat Ben Yavi Lo Ben Yavi, it sounds like you do either one, right?
Right, and that he said is not the Stumin case. That's before he died, and that was a case where he just said, I'm going to use this for my obligation. So when he says it's the generic, this is the way Tosfos reads it. We'll see the Gemara actually is going to clarify a little more in this line. When he just says generically obligation, it can be all for one, all for the other. But if you say, this is my korbanot are coming from this pile, and you say korbanot in plural, that he says is the case of Stumim, that they're both definitely coming from it, but you haven't designated which is which. And in that case, the halacha is Yiplul Nidava. So anyway, our point is that this halacha that we said by Nazir is the exact same halacha here by other things. So the Gemara, so why do we say it's only by a Nazir? So the Gemara says, Tana Nazir v'chayve kinim didamula. All right, we don't mean only a Nazir. We mean it's halacha by everything like a Nazir. Now, what's like a Nazir? What's like a Nazir is that it is one obligation that leads to multiple korbanot. Nazir has three types of korbanot. This woman, let's say, who's given birth, has two types of korbanot. And there, the pile, therefore, even if the pile is set aside for all of the korbanot, because it all derives from one obligation, there's a chiddush, and one of those obligations happens to be an ola, that it can all go towards the ola purpose. But if they were two separate obligations and happened to be one pile of money, you would not have this chiddush. What's an example of that? I'll give you an example. Let's take a look. To exclude the following breita, meaning it's only for Nazir and, like this case of Yoledes, not for a case that's discussed in the following breita. Lafuke does not mean it disagrees with the following breita. It means to distinguish it from the following breita. Often lafuke means it's rejecting the position of the following breita, but here it means to distinguish it from the following ruling. Okay, somebody who's obligated chatas. Ola. And in addition to bringing a chatas, he accepted just an obligation of another, completely unrelated to his chatas obligation. V'ifri shmos, and he set aside money. This is for my obligation. Okay, so Ratza lavi ben chatas behema lo yavi olas behema lo yavi. So now what is he going to do with it? So basically says he cannot bring it all for chatas and all for nola. So here's a case, again, it goes into this case of two types of unspecified piles. One unspecified pile where we say both funds come from it, and one unspecified pile where you can use all for one, all for the other. So this Gemara is assuming that because you say lichovoti for my obligation, it means for all of my obligations. And therefore, from this pile, both has to come chatas and an ola.
Oh, so these are lichovotai then, right?
Lichovotai, I guess. That's lichovot sheli. Right?
No, what would you, in other words, are we trying to distinguish between for all my chovot or a specific chovot?
No, all my chovot. Chovoti. Chovot sheli.
How was it?
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. You guys can worry about the grammar. Okay, moving on. Okay, moving on. All right. So, anyway, he said, people, okay, back to the Gemara. He said that if this is for my obligations, plural, we'll assume that that's what he said, then he, as opposed to the case before, right, with the pile for the ola and the shlamim, for the two birds, that when the woman was alive or whatever, she could redesignate it all to one, all to the other. If you're a little bit too clear and you mean all of my obligations, then this pile has both monies of a chatas and an ola in it, so you can't use it all for one. Now, what do? You don't use it for anything. So what you basically have to do is now you could say, well, you can split it and you get to decide how to divide it. That's what I would have said. Yeah. And then all the bright here means is that you can't use it all for one or all for the other. Tosa says a little bit even more complicated. You have to take an animal and you have to say, however much of the money in there is for the chatas, it's transferred to this animal as a chatas. And then you take another animal and say, however much money there is sanctified for an ola, that kedusha is transferred to this ola. So that's a little funny. I would have thought if you sanctified the pile and you didn't specify that now you can designate how much goes for each one. Okay, but no, this is two. This is a person who's obligated in a chatas and also accepts an ola obligation. All right, so anyway, so that's first case number one. This person has two independent obligations, a chatas and an ola. Set aside a pile. It's a scenario where the language he used indicated that pile was both monies in it. And because it was both monies in it, he cannot use it all for one or all for the other. He has to somehow split it between the two. Now, then, of course, he goes up and he dies on us. Mace. Okay, he dies. Okay, v'hayula most dumin. And we have this unspecified pile. Okay, and now actually, as we've already even said explicitly, it has both monies in it. So what do you do with it? This case, you do not get to reuse it as an ola. It all has to get thrown into the ocean. Why? Because it is not two korbanot that derive from one obligation. It's two completely separate obligations that happen both to have their, these funds are to serve two separate korbanot obligations, one a chatas, one an ola. Since some of this money is a chatas money, and you don't know how much or whatever, you can't separate it out, you have to throw it all out, throw into the ocean. Okay? So the halacha ben Nazir is dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Even if when he was alive, he would be allowed to separate out a portion, the amount. Now that he's dead, he can't, and you have to throw it all out. Now, so again, the halacha ben Nazir, it's not limited to a Nazir. Somebody who has an obligation that leads to multiple korbanot. A Nazir brings 3, a lettuce brings 2, and a pile of money is set aside, even if it's designated that all of the korbanot are going to come from this pile of money. If the person dies, the money can all get used towards an ola. Since one of those obligations is an ola, that's the halacha l'moshe misinai, or that's what we learned from the pasuk. But if somebody has separate obligations and sets aside money, and all of the obligations are to come from this money, then if there's a chatas among them, it all has to get thrown out. Now, if it's not a chatas among them, let's say you had a shlamim obligation and an ola obligation, then there would be something to do. Then you could go ahead and take two animals, and say the shlamim money is transferred, kedusha is transferred to this animal as a shlamim. The ola money is transferred to this animal as an ola. That's not an option if one of the monies is for a chatas, because a chatas that cannot be brought only has to die, and therefore the money of a chatas that can't be brought has to be thrown out. So there is no way of solving the problem if it is chatas money that's messed up.
Right?
Well, Asham would be interesting because Asham might be able to be transferred to an ola, so we're going to worry about a chatas. Okay, so let's take a look a little bit more in the Gemara. Amar Rav Ashi, Hada Marta Mifurashim Lo. That which you say that if the money has been designated, then going back, not the case we said, the back of like the case of the Nazir, the case of the Yoledes, where you are allowed to use the funds after the person died towards an ola, or that's what you're not allowed, that's what you have to do, but that would only be if the pile has been non-designated. Once the pile's been designated, you can no longer use those funds for an ola, right? So now we're going to try to identify what does designated mean. Okay, so let's take a look. Amar Rav Ashi, when you have this pile of money from this Nazir or this Yoledes, it's only if it's not designated. So we're talking about a Nazir. Don't say it's the very clear case. This is my chatas, this is my ola, this is my shlamim. Obviously, in that case, you cannot reuse the chatas money for something else, or even the shlamim money for something else. Don't say it's only that case. Elafilu Amar. So as opposed to what we've been saying, we're not opposed to, but it now becomes very, very subtle, the differences. If you say this pile is for all my korbanot, then it's considered non-designated, which is which. And the guy dies or the vow is annulled or whatever happens, and you get to use it all for an ola. But if the person says, this pile is for my chatas, ola, and shlamim, and doesn't say which is for which, because he specifically or she specifically identified chatas, ola, and shlamim, that seems that the chatas identity has been made more concrete, and now that's been made more concrete, the money cannot be used for an ola. Okay, so the special halacha that a non-designated pile can be used for an ola is only if the person has not concretely said, my chatas is coming from this. All right, that's his chiddush. Now the Gemara says a similar point. The Ikadami, some say, Amar Ravashi, Lo tema ad amar elu l'chatasiu l'olasiu l'shlami. Not only do you have to say that would that make it so concrete that you cannot use this money for an ola. Elafilu amar elu l'chovasi harein kimufurashim. This is for my obligation. That's like explicit. So then it becomes, so what's the case that's not explicit, right? So that's what Tosfos figures out. So maybe the only case now that's not explicit, if you say like, this is for somehow for my nizirut. How is that really so much different than saying this is for my chovah? And if the difference is that in one case it's open-ended enough that it can all go towards one korban, and chovati implies, or chovoti, I guess. Anyway, it implies all of my korbanot. So then there's very little chiddush left in this halacha. Because if the way you sanctified this pile was that you could use all the money towards any one, then it's not such a big chiddush that after the guy dies that it can all be used for an olah. Because even when he was alive, it could all be used for only one. So once we say that that's considered miforashim, it's not so clear what is the case where you have chatas money mixed up that it can still be used, and potential chatas money mixed up that can still be used towards an olah. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, from my understanding is if he said that, I'm putting, I say it's in 3 coins, right? This is from, he says,
Yeah.
3 of these, I'm going to be using some ola, chatas, and whatever it is, right? So why can't we take one of the coins and say, well, at least one of them was meant to be an ola, and just give that? We're saying what? Like the money itself is like, each one is a little bit of chatas in it?
Like what you do with Dana.
Wait, one more time. What's the question?
So as you put in, like, whatever it is, you put in $100, right?
Right. Why not leave over just $1?
$1 for the ola.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I guess it's because we don't ultimately know like which dollar it is, and we're not able to designate which is.
$1.
Yeah, exactly. We're not able to designate which dollar. Okay. Anyway, if you want to see Tosfos trying to explain what the difference is, let me find the right line of Tosfos. Okay, so if you take a look, it is 5 lines down in the wide lines where it says Haggah, like after 2 dots on the wide lines of Tosfos. He says,
Which Tosfos?
the Tosfos Hadamarta. But go 5 lines down in the wide lines where the whole wide lines of Tosfos begins, the middle of the line, Haggah. Ikadamri, Kiyamar l'chovosi nami kimifurashim b'taroveshem. V'yochli yam hamelach. L'chovosi mashma l'kol chovosi. Bein l'chatas bein l'olah. Ustumim d'yiplu l'nedava. How do you kiyamar l'korbanos nizirotei? Somehow korbanot is better than chovoti. Shelo pirish chatas behen. Mikol makom mashma nami de l'kol korbanos kama. Right? If it meant any one of the korbanot, it wouldn't be a chiddush at all. Then you could use the whole pile, obviously, for one thing. So somehow when you say korbanot, and it means all the korbanot, that's not mifurashim. Okay? So even though there it also meant all the korbanot, and you couldn't use it for one thing, but that is not enough mifurashim. But if you somehow say chovoti, that's already more mifurash, and it's considered like the chatas is more concrete, and you can't misuse it. Don't ask me. I don't understand how these are really different. All right, yes.
They're talking about, in other words, this particular coin. In other words, it's like very concrete, correct? In other words, money is usually value, and so the value could be either for this or for that. So they actually, it's like a 1-to-1 correspondence. This coin was meant for this chata, this coin for that, and they don't know which one is which.
Right.
That's like the issue. And in other words, because a pile of coins is symbolic of general value.
Yeah, but when you sanctify coins, it's, if this coin was sanctified as for chatos, I can't just say, well, it just meant I was giving money for a chatos.
Right, so that's what I thought. It's extremely concrete.
Absolutely.
Like the absolute physical object of the coin is like a piece of the animal.
Exactly. Okay, let's just read one more line. So anyway, what we do see here is, it's not limited to Nazir. It applies to other things where multiple obligations derive from one thing. There's a case where something is so non-specified that even when the person is alive, they can use the pile towards all of one korban. There's other cases where it's not specified, but it's clear multiple korbanot have to come from it. That's the chiddush, that even in that case where multiple korbanot have to come from it, if it can't be used, the person died, other types of things happen, it gets to all go for an olah. But then there's a case where somehow the fact that there's a chatas here has been said so concretely that even though it's not specified yet, it still can't be used for an olah. So the clear example is the person just said explicitly, chatas ola shlomim are coming from here. The other case gets much more vague what the exact line of distinction is. But the chiddush is, even if it's still not specified which is which. Once chatas has been labeled explicitly, it can now not be used for an ola. Let's do one more line here of Rava and finish this amud. Amar Rava, had amin mos tumim yiplu l'nedava. When we say that the non-specified pile goes for an ola, inafla demechatas mi beinehen arein kimifurashim. Listen to this interesting halacha. Let's say I separated out this pile. This pile is going to be for my korbanot, for my Nazir. Okay, I'm a woman. And I separated this out because my husband's about to annul the vow. But before he does, I separate out this pile. And then I say, you know what? I'm going to take this amount of this money, and this will be for my chatos. And then this pile now is left with basically being an ola and shlomim money. Since something has been made concrete from that pile, we don't say, oh, well, the rest is ola and shlomim. That's even better. There's no chatas money in here at all. So now if my husband annuls the vow, certainly we can use it all for an ola. That would be the logical thing to say. Even better, you took the chatas money out. No. Now that I've made one piece of that pile concrete, it's like the whole pile has become more concrete and less, this is all sort of like, was it like Heisenberg on some principle, like, its whole identity hasn't yet formed yet when it's stumim. Then we can sort of like form it. But once something has been made concrete about it, like even the chatas part is made concrete about it, now it's come more into the real world, and now it cannot be, re-identified. So even in that case,
Ola and Shlomim, what happens to that?
then the money has to be divided between an ola and a shlomim. Whether it's divided 50-50, exactly what you do with it, but it doesn't all go with an ola. It now has stopped living in the completely, non-real world of indeterminate identity. Since part of it has been given a determinate identity, the whole thing has become more concrete and therefore cannot be redefined. Okay, so we will end with that.
The chatat is very powerful. The identity of a chatat is koveo, all these